If you'd like to participate in the discussion or leave us feedback, you can contact us at levelupyourgamingpodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook at facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. If you like the content and want to hear more of the show, subscribing will ensure you don't miss an episode. New episodes come out almost every Wednesday. Also, please review, tell a friend about the podcast, or share with your gaming group. Now sit back and enjoy the episode. Welcome into the Love Up Game Podcast. My name is Aaron, and joining me once again, I've got Josh. Josh, how you doing today?
Just stressed out. Just we're heading into the holidays at full steam.
Oh yeah,
and planning things it feels like every single day. But how about you?
We are also obviously approaching the holidays, trying to see how we're going to get every weekend to sort of work out. The weekends are filling up fast, and time is a precious thing when you have two children, as you know.
Yeah, I'm well aware. It's you've got all these different moving parts. You've got all these different activities you want to get together, and you sort of have to piece it together so that everything fits, and hope it doesn't fall apart like a big old pile of Jenga blocks.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite the conundrum, quite the puzzle you have to kind of work through.
It is quite the puzzle. Quite the puzzle.
Quite the puzzle. And that's why today we're talking about puzzles your players will actually like.
We're back doing segues. So, this is something I wanted to talk about because, in terms of puzzles, I've been doing a ton of work on the Mega Dungeon. I'm getting some really good, fleshed out areas in there. And one of the things I want to do with any sort of dungeon is you need to break it up. You need to have a little bit of space in there, right? So you can't just have combat session after combat session. You got to have traps, and you got to have puzzles.
Yeah, it wouldn't be really a big old mega dungeon if it didn't have those things involved in it. So, I mean, I kind of agree that that's sort of the quintessential dungeon when you think about it.
Yeah, but I don't think that you have to limit puzzles just to dungeon environments. We've talked about this before. We've had them also in mysteries and in capers. It's always fun when people are trying to sneak through a place to avoid fights and they come across a big puzzle box that they need to solve. I think puzzles are a great way to break up the action.
Yeah, no, they are a tool to be used, and I tend to use them sparingly, but they are definitely a tool to be used to change everything up. That's why you've got kind of your main aspects of your role playing: your physical, your mental, and your social. You want the triumvirate there to become your game, so your game isn't all samey. You don't want everything just to be like go into dungeon, murder creature A, go into dungeon, murder creature B.
I mean, I've played those games. That's a fun game, but it's also a very boring game. You can't just keep doing that same thing and expect any real development, any good story. I like puzzles. I do puzzles to help deal with a lot of the stress. Like I said, we are actually quite busy. And I'll sit down and just do a puzzle, sort of take my mind off of things. And I think a lot of other people do as well. One of the things to think about when you're talking about putting a puzzle into a TTRPG is time. Right?
Yeah. Well, again, puzzles by their nature can either be very, very simple or very, very challenging to solve, which again, this makes the incorporation of them within your game a delicate proposition because you don't want it to be,
So you got to do it right. So if you've got a puzzle, you should take a look and see how long do you expect it to take, and then double that. Not because people are dumb. In fact, I was looking it up. I was thinking that, groups of people would be harder to solve puzzles. Turns out that studies have been shown groups of people that are focused on a puzzle together, that are actually working on it together, solve them at greater rates than even some of the best people who do puzzle solving on their own. So your gaming group, your players, can solve puzzles, and they can solve them well. They have to work together, and they have to be in the right mind space. So I kind of think if you're going to be doing puzzles or introducing puzzles, introduce them early in a night, in a session. You don't want people to be tired from gaming for a couple of hours or whatnot, and then throw a real mind bender at them. They're just going to balk. They're not going to go anywhere. You throw it at them early, and you give them time to work through it.
Yeah, and again, you want to know whether or not, where you decide to throw in the puzzle is one thing. So it's throwing it in early is important, but also then making determinations on whether or not that impedes progress to your players is another. So you don't want to throw in a puzzle at the beginning of the session that impedes progress. And so now your players are stuck unless they solve the puzzle right now. Like, they might not want to solve the puzzle in that moment, but, presenting a puzzle, okay, and again, we're going to talk about what are good ones versus bad ones and yada, yada, and how to make, really engaging ones. You don't want them to just be like, okay, here's a puzzle, and now I have to sit here and I've got to solve Josh's Jenga tower.
Well, I think, if you're throwing puzzles in early in the game, don't make them super complicated. You want them there. They're going to be breaking up the action. They're going to sort of start things off in your session. If you've got a more complicated puzzle, something more difficult, something you really want your players to think about and take their time with, end your session with it. Have it as the lead into your next game. Like, here's the puzzle. I'm going to describe the whole thing for you. Maybe even give handouts and let your players take them home.
Yeah. No,
it's
again,
homework, but it's homework.
It's homework. You better do it. If you show up later, you'll get an F and no experience. There
you
go. So I mean, again, the crux of this whole thing is what makes a good puzzle. And so, you could give them, a cipher, or you could give them, an actual riddle. You could give them like these are all examples of a puzzle, but what actually is a good puzzle?
Well, I think a random puzzle you pull from a book is just that. A puzzle that fits into the story is much better. I think you can use puzzles to tell your players information about the NPCs or the environment that they're in. You can use a puzzle to sort of help tell a story, right? If you've got a wizard and they've got these complicated color puzzles or whatnot, that sort of fits with a theme. And maybe those color puzzles lead into how to fight the wizard later. You've solved, how his colors match up. Oh, now you can figure out how his spells are working and you can sort of counteract them. You could do something with a dungeon. You're entering this ancient tomb, and there are, there's a story that the glyphs on the walls are telling, and you've got to put the things in the right order. And now you understand what happened to the people that were here, and that's how you were able to enter the next room. You're showing that you're worthy to make it on by understanding the history of the place that you're exploring. And these sort of puzzles that that not only fit the theme, but inform your players about the game, about the people that are interacting with, those are going to be good puzzles. Those are puzzles that people are going to remember and are going to enjoy actually working on. You pull a random riddle from a book that doesn't mean anything, that's just there to waste your players' time.
Yeah, no, I think that's that's a good point that you make there. That it should be, again, it's got to be meaningful to your story as a whole. Otherwise, what are you doing? Again, if it's something that like if you can't infer from the story or beats within the story or people that you talk to within the story, or if the puzzle isn't so isolated and contained within the context of where you put it, that you can't solve it any other way, it just makes no sense to be there. Like, again, you're not just looking for like the book of riddles and like, I need a puzzle, time to put out a riddle.
Okay, I guess we're gonna play the Towers of Hanoi again. No, have something that means something, have something that fits the context, something that can inform your players about the situation. Like, all these are great ways to include a puzzle, but still you have to have a good puzzle, right?
Yeah, again, I like puzzles where again, there's multiple ways to solve it. So, you're gonna want to make sure that, there are can you circumvent the puzzle? I suppose with enough ingenuity that in and of itself is a puzzle. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to defeat your puzzle without actually solving the puzzle you put in front of them. Okay.
Yeah. Which in itself can be interesting, because if your puzzle, solving it helps your players, with a future task. Like, if they were actually able to solve this, they would learn how the wizard does his magic spells and can, shine the lights through the colored windows to counteract his spells or whatnot. But they just like brute force their way through the puzzle. They're going to have a harder time later. And this is an interesting concept. They're like, you could have worked through it. You decided to brute force yourself through it. Now you're going to have to fight a wizard without, any sort of backup. And same thing with like the tomb, where you got to tell the story. You fight your way. You don't put the puzzles in the right spot, the pieces to line up the story, the history of this ancient tomb, and just sort of like wedge the door open. Well, now all the traps are set because you didn't declare yourself as a safe person. Bypassing puzzles is interesting, and you don't hold up a game because your players don't want to solve a thing. Have it there, give them a reward for doing it, but don't hold up the game because you're not. To that end, there should be a clear goal. Like, just because you see tiles on the wall and you gotta you can rearrange them, there needs to be doing this will open said door. Solving this puzzle will do this thing. And they may not see all of where it's going to go, but they see that there is a goal. There is a reason to complete the puzzle.
Yes, having cause and effect to the puzzle is very important. You don't want them just to solve it and be like, congratulations, you solved the riddle. Put that away. I won't hit you with another riddle for another 3 dungeons.
Well, that's another thing. Is like, your players need to be able to understand what the instructions are. Like, and not just you calling out, okay, it's puzzle time. This is a puzzle where you've got to slide the tiles around until the picture lines up. Go. And like, sure, you can do that, but that's like, it takes you out of the story. You should have a clear goal, but you also need to have something your players can look at. You describe a scene to them and they realize, oh, this is a puzzle, and here's how we can solve it. I may not know the solution right now, but like, here are the things that I can work with to find a solution.
Yeah. And again, most of what you end up doing within a game in terms of story and beats and intrigue, whatever it might be, is in fact a puzzle. So your game always is at its core a puzzle. It's a very loose one that has a lot of winding paths and different ways to get to the end of it. It's sort of like you're playing Clue and it's actually probably the best way I put it. You're playing Clue.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of stories that I've told or been a part of, you present your players with a lot of, like, a big puzzle at the beginning. You know, that who murdered Lord Chunky Butt? And, you know, they don't get clues. They've got to go and find them. They've got to go and solve things. This should be fairly contained. When you actually want to do like one of these puzzles, you don't want them going searching all over the manor to find clues to solve the thing, because that in itself is its own story. You know, that is that's a one shot, that's a little bit of an adventure, whatever it is. That is perfectly fine, but a puzzle that's going to be a puzzle, should be fairly self-contained. The pieces and parts should be like either right with it or within a room of that area, so that, you know, you got to go to the next room to get the thing and bring it back, do this, you know, so there's a little bit of movement or whatnot, but it's got to be easy to understand. Your players should be able to see what it is from where they're at and how they're going to solve it. People can be very clever and pick things up. And like I said, I went and I looked it up. Apparently groups are even better at that, at solving puzzles. So I'm not saying you need to throw the hardest puzzles ever at your players. Find things that are easy. Find things that are fun. Find things that match a theme. Yeah.
So why do puzzles not work?
Well, I think the one that I've run into the most for me is my players are not me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, I mean, that is the, like, whenever you tell a story, that's the big one that you have to remember.
Yeah.
They don't know all the stuff I know about the story.
Exactly. Or like, so when you're sitting behind the screen, you know, you're sitting behind that game master screen, you got all your notes sitting in front of you, and you tell your players everything you think that they should know, and they should be able to solve it from there. But you've got more information. And your players
have the solution.
You've got the solution. Yeah. So things that are obvious to you as the game master are not always obvious to your players. And you need to really do like an accurate and complete description of what's going on. And you need to make sure that your players have the tools necessary to solve puzzles, to figure out that it is a puzzle. I mean, that's a great place right there. The other thing I think is something that you've talked about quite a bit, Aaron. If they're solving a puzzle, don't make your players roll dice.
Yes and no. Because the game that you are playing has dice, and your characters should have meta knowledge of things that maybe you don't see. So you can always roll to get a clue. Okay? Like, you can help your players solve that puzzle by letting them use their characters to solve the puzzle itself. Okay? Mm-hmm. Again, I think that puzzles, like, if I gave you a crossword puzzle to do in person when we were playing a game, and I said, figure this out, okay, no matter how simple it is, okay, it might be like the easiest thing ever, like rhymes with cat. It's a 3-letter word like bat, okay? Like, you know,
Cat, bat, rat, Like, you're not helping me, man. What's the first letter?
Okay, so there's a lot of things that you know. This is the ultimate conundrum with puzzles. Is if I give you one, okay, to solve, no matter how simple it is you thinking through the problem. Okay. Mm-hmm. And that is a bad puzzle in a lot of cases because you might not want to solve a crossword puzzle. Okay. Yeah. Now, if I give you a situation in a game that is a puzzle, okay, that, you know, come up with a word that rhymes with cat. Okay. I don't care what word it is. Just come up with a word that rhymes with cat. That is a puzzle. Purple. It's a, yeah.
Sorry.
So you shouldn't make them roll necessarily to solve the puzzle. Okay. You should be able to solve the puzzle by solving it with your own brain power on behalf of your character, or you can get clues by rolling the dice to solve the puzzle. And if through a series, let's say your players just aren't having it, through a series of brute force, you can solve the puzzle by rolling out the puzzle. Okay. I don't think it's you want to find a happy medium within your player group. So again, that's where you got to kind of know what puzzles can work for your players and what puzzles don't. And ones that are within the game are always going to be better puzzles than puzzles that are physical interactions outside of the game. Because if I tried to tell you about a series of lights in a room or tiles in a room, and your players are like, oh, well, I can take you've got a green block, a yellow block, and a red block, okay? And when you put them together, you know, when you put them on the light, they do nothing. But when you finally put them all together, then, you know, you get the rainbow and all the other stuff. All the colors come together. So, you know, you're like, oh, that's it. That's how we solve the puzzle, okay? And then, you know, you can play that into the wizard battle later on. Again, I haven't thought through this puzzle. I'm just giving you a rough example.
Yep, wizard puzzle battle it is.
Wizard puzzle battle it is. So now you've done something in the game. You've solved a puzzle because it is a game-based puzzle, okay? And it has given you insight into how to tackle the wizard, okay? Based on what steps you use during the puzzle to solve it, which makes the puzzle fight against the wizard better, okay? It's still annoying as piss, and you cannot make that wizard immortal without having to solve the like do not make your players solve the puzzle again to kill the wizard. But make the fight more unique if they incorporate the stuff they've learned. That's like the key to puzzles, is that they shouldn't stop you from what you are doing. And it doesn't mean that like you can't enjoy them and have fun, but there is a limit to how you stretch a puzzle, and you must allow your players to work through those puzzles based on character knowledge. And again, the hints are important because a good hint can help you really tip the scales on a puzzle. So,
I think hints or clues to puzzles are necessary for any good puzzle. And you know, a clue should be it doesn't need to be like, no, you got to put that over there, or like, no, hey, did you try turning it? No, it should be part of the narrative. It should be part of the environment. Your clues, your hints and stuff like that really need to come from a place of within the story. I like you're saying like if players can roll to get clues, you know, hints and stuff based off of their already existing character knowledge. I would like to take that a step further and like some of that base information, like if a character has a background in history or religion, right? And this is in that tomb, maybe they could be like, oh, you've seen something like this before where it's, you know, usually a pictogram depicting the history of things. It doesn't tell you, it's not going to tell the characters in what order they're supposed to go, but it gives reference or idea. And they could roll then to get more information. but you have that base information because your characters have base information. Base information your players don't. And that is, you're absolutely right. Puzzles exist in that weird meta space between character knowledge and player knowledge, where your players are solving it as their characters. So if you've got, Dr. Brainiac over here playing Thog the Barbarian with an IQ of negative 40, rocks are smarter than him. But he's looking at it like, well, obviously you just got to turn that thing and then you got to flip this because that's what he does as his job. When he's not gaming with you, then it's going to be a weird thing. But Thog could look at it and be like, Thog turned stuff before.
Yeah, I get it. And let's say like I was just thinking of this as you're talking about it, is like, let's say you hit a door that has 3 switches on it, okay? And there's a combination in which you flip the switches and the door opens, okay? You could brute force your way through that, okay? But what you want to do is, if you want your players to solve the puzzle or use inference from the room to solve the puzzle, if the players just flip, okay, a trap goes off. now there is a little bit of a stake to wanting to solve the puzzle. So now, your players will ask you questions about the room and, trying to pick up clues. You'll give them the clues. Okay. And your players might go, this doesn't make any sense to me, Josh. I don't understand. Okay. How come you're making me solve this puzzle in front of me with these 3 clues? And you go, okay, well, roll some dice. Okay. Because you're a smart guy and you understand, enigmas. So roll your dice. Okay. Well, so you also notice this thing about the clues, like, you can coax them along into solving the puzzle without necessarily solving it on their behalf.
Mm-hmm. But once again, it should be like a good puzzle exists in the game for a reason. It exists, within the narrative. It exists within the as information. It's set up by somebody. Somebody created this thing. Puzzles are generally not natural phenomenon. Maybe they are. You could go to the puzzled universe, and that's just how things are. But
what an awesome game that would be.
That sounds terrible. And like so much work. I mean, it might be fun to play, but like I would hate running that game.
I get to see halfway through that game when your players throws the damn puzzle, the crowd breaks into a million pieces. I'm done with this.
Yeah. I told you we've been playing one of our new games. One of the guys is DMing for the first time for us. He's DM'd before, but like it's the first time for us. We're playing Paranoia, and he wants to do it in Tabletop Simulator. Love Tabletop Simulator. I mean, it's way too complicated. It's not an actual VTT. It is literally just a 3D representation of a table, and you get to move stuff around on it.
I know where you're going.
And you're absolutely right. We're playing Puzzle Universe. That one button up at the top of the screen that says flip the table is going to be the most used button. Anyway, back to reality. I think that a good puzzle should exist within the narrative. I think that your clues should exist within that space as well. Yes, players' knowledge is one thing. Characters have their own knowledge. That's why you fill out skills on character sheets. That's why characters have backstories.
It doesn't necessarily mean that you're it doesn't necessarily mean that you can roll and solve, like, okay, just roll. Your player solves the puzzle. Okay, you can do that, and I will not frown upon you if that's how you want to run your puzzles. Okay, like at all. Okay, because it's perfectly within the context of the players and the characters and the rules of the game. Okay, or you can have your players roll and they get more in-depth clues till eventually the solution is so clear that your player can solve the puzzle.
Yeah. It's always a good idea to give them a puzzle that should be solvable. Like it's like, I know we said that groups of people are better at solving puzzles than even some of the best individuals, that doesn't mean that those people are sitting at your table. Your players may not be excellent puzzle solvers. And even working together, they may not be. So like, don't make super complicated puzzles, especially ones that are going to be, putting up brick walls in front of things. Aaron said it before, if there's a way to bypass it, maybe that's a way to do it. If they can solve it, or you can give them the hints and clues through a narrative sense with their characters in mind, with the environment in mind, to lead them through the puzzle, excellent. But it may not work anyway.
Yeah, again, if you think about like a video game, a puzzle works really well because you've got a lot of tangibility and like accessibility within the video game. Within a tabletop, unless you're going to pull something out of it, or unless you're going to incorporate it into the map in some way, it's a little bit harder to hold and tinker with the puzzle. Okay, which is why again we're talking about puzzles that are really interesting to do, or good puzzles basically, and puzzle that your players will like, because and you're right about the simplicity of the puzzle. Again, I'm going to go back to your first point, which is take the amount of time you think it will take to solve a puzzle, then double it. Okay. Even really simple puzzles can be really, really challenging depending on the context of where they arise. So, we're going to talk now about some of these different puzzle types and the pros and cons between each one of them. But should you have not heeded any of our warnings at this point, these are the puzzles that will work for you.
I'm not saying these will work for you. I'm saying these are puzzles that I have specifically been looking at putting into my game, and the pros and the cons around them. And
also, there's an expectation thing too. In your mega dungeon, the expectation is that they're going to be puzzles that need to be solved. Okay, yes. In a again, if you end up walking through, your cyberpunk game, okay, and then you're going on a heist and you're doing something in your cyberpunk game, and then you get to a hallway and there's a bunch of sliding tiles. Like what the heck is this here?
Like, you want a cyberpunk puzzle? You're going to a cyberpunk, you're going to an underground rave, but the guy at the door won't let you in unless you solve a CAPTCHA. Okay, and like part of it is a riddle, so you got to solve the CAPTCHA and answer the riddle, and you're like, that's a decent puzzle for a cyberpunk game. It makes sense. It's within the narrative. You obviously it should make sense for what's going on. You don't just throw things. You're not like in line at Starbucks, but you can't order unless you solve this, Sudoku. It's just not a thing.
Or you could have that crazy king who turns himself into a dungeon, a la Earthbound.
Yeah. You show up at a manor up on the hill because you were invited there for dinner, but all the guests are ghosts, and now you've got to find out a way to cut the cake into 13 equal pieces. Otherwise you can't make it to the basement where the maze is.
And then you bring out a cake physically atop the table and say, "Have fun."
Yeah, and there's skulls on some of the pieces, and and so you got to make sure that every one of the 13 pieces has a skull on it, and they have to. Do you know what I'm talking about, Aaron? Is that too old?
I don't know what you're talking about.
That's Seventh Guest. Do you remember the video game Seventh Guest?
No, I might be familiar with it.
It's an old game. It's an old game. It's DOS, okay?
Pre-Windows. Well, I'm totally derailing.
Yeah.
Josh
anyway,
here, so.
let's go off into actually talking about some of these puzzles. The first one that I was thinking of for my game was a cryptex. Do you know what a cryptex is?
Yes. So this is the well, I'm assuming it's a like a cipher based puzzle.
It's a cylinder with like capped ends, and the cylinder itself is made up of various rings, and the rings have letters or symbols on them, and when you turn them and line them all up on one side, it opens, much like a bike lock, right? And the cylinder opens, and inside the cylinder is something. It could be an item, it could be a note, it could be nothing. The nice part about a cryptex is that it is a puzzle, but it's a puzzle your players can pick up and take with them.
The nice thing about that puzzle would be that it's a puzzle you don't necessarily need to solve.
Mm-hmm.
Because like this is a great example of one that doesn't impede any play within the time and path. It offers a reward should you solve it. Okay. And it is the reward could be great or it could be nothing. So I mean again, but the reward would be knowledge of how to solve them in the future. So they're actually this is a really good example of a puzzle because it doesn't impede your players necessarily.
Yeah, and it can have an actual tangible reward inside that is additionally beneficial. Just a magical object or potion or I don't know, the flash drive that gives your character super legs into a Cyberpunk game. I don't care. It's whatever you want it to be. The downside is that it's not exactly a super complex puzzle.
No, it's like a bike clock. You could eventually brute force through it.
Mm-hmm. And you can brute force through it. There's only so many words you can use, sort of thing, or symbols or patterns. But on the flip of that, if you can spread the clues out a little bit more. It may not be the players can pick it up. They can find out how to solve it later. And that's the thing. So, you talked about sliding tiles.
And here we are at sliding tiles.
I like sliding tiles, to like make a picture or to line up historical events or whatever like it is. Once again, you're absolutely right. It needs to fit the environment it's in. You can't just throw sliding tile puzzles at anybody at just random points. They should be in places where they matter.
Yes. The sliding tiles, I like it actually better at the way that you just described with like maybe like putting historical events in order. Okay. That makes a little bit more sense in a lot of contexts than like you don't want to give like your players one of those little like sliding majiggers, that I guess you could, but again, because you can solve that. Almost anybody can solve that puzzle. Okay. Mm-hmm.
It just takes time.
It just takes time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're incorporating into the environment, that puzzle doesn't necessarily fit the greatest. But I do like the idea of sliding like events in place.
Yeah, and what's nice about like what you can do with the sliding, it's easy to understand. It's so easy. Your players are going to see it. There's tiles. They move around. There's spaces. You got to put them in the right order. They don't even have to understand what the right order is. They just understand that is it. There's an easy goal. It's easy to understand the instructions.
For your main dungeon, this actually fits really well because this is something that you would expect to be there, and it's actually something you can use to like impede your players. And then the picture one makes sense. Like some weird person built this sliding puzzle room.
So you have to make it feel not cheap because sliding tile puzzles are kind of cheap, right? They're really easy to do. So you can do things like the history thing, like having it larger, not like more pieces, but like physically larger. Like maybe the sliding tiles are floating blocks over a big vat of acid, and your players have to slide the blocks into the right positions so that everybody can get across, like a one of those goat chicken grain boat trip things.
Yes. Okay.
But you can also do a sliding puzzle where the tiles are missing, and they got to go and collect the tiles and put them back into the puzzle. And so you've got options here. I think it's a really nice way to do things. It does need to fit the theme.
Yes, I agree.
I put riddle down.
Again, a riddle is always a it fits appropriately in a lot of different situations.
Yeah. I was putting down like little definitions of things, cryptics, sliding puzzles are understandable, and riddle, and I was like, what is a riddle? And so I went, Oxford Dictionary defines it as a question or statement intentionally phrased so as to require ingenuity in ascertaining its answer or meaning. Basically, everything that you throw at your players that you don't want them to get right away is a riddle. Most of what your players are going to be dealing with in terms of any sort of like back talk or mystery or whatnot is going to be riddle-ish in some way or another.
Okay, yeah.
It's a big part of your game. But when we're talking about, well, go ahead.
So when you put it that way, then yes, it exists all over the place in your game. Your game is going to be a riddle all the time, almost.
Yeah. But we're not talking about the big one. We're talking about little riddles, like a little thing to get through this next little area. People like riddles. They don't like dumb riddles. People like feeling clever. So, like, you have to give your riddles need to make sense. They should, like, if you're having simple riddles, like solve this, like your Cyberpunk game. We're talking about, they gotta read the CAPTCHA, and the CAPTCHA is actually a riddle with like squiggly lines behind it. But the riddle should be fairly easy for people who are thinking Cyberpunk to go and to answer. It needs to make sense. Once again, same deal. What's obvious to you may not be obvious to your players.
Yes, and riddles inherently have this sort of situation to them, is that you're like, it's so clear what the answer is. This is such an easy situation. Like, oh no, well, the answer.
Another one that I've thrown a lot of work into. I wrote a little program to encrypt and decrypt text.
See, I think this one would actually be fun with your cryptics.
Mm-hmm.
So the cryptics can help you learn how to work through the encrypted text.
That's exactly how I'm using it.
Okay, yeah. So this actually is very this is a smart way to do things, because you're probably going to encounter a lot of it within the dungeon, and it's very intuitive and very very in line with how the dungeon would go, and it can give you like warnings, and it can give you explanations of like what you should do. It can tell you the answer to a puzzle that maybe you run into in the future. Okay, there's a lot of great things about this that work, and all it is that you just need to have been doing some of the legwork earlier on to be able to enjoy this part of it. I actually think this fits fairly well within the game itself, and you're probably thinking, well, then how do you incorporate like answering or doing roles or whatever with this? Well, you can do that. You can as time goes on, you see a bunch of it, and let's say your players haven't solved the cryptics, and they haven't done any of that work. They didn't do any of the legwork. They've been having a real heck of a time with your encrypted text. You can say, okay, well, hey, you're a historian. You roll, or you're a linguistics expert. You roll, and okay, you got a couple letters here. So it helps you kind of figure it out. It's sort of like in Final Fantasy X when you start picking up the
Al Bhed ciphers.
Yeah, the Al Bhed ciphers. Yeah. So like, and so what you could then do is you can display the word like that, and then it's sort of like Wheel of Fortune at that point, where you can infer what maybe is being said should you get enough letters.
Yeah.
As you kind of go along.
I'd like to buy a vowel. Well, spend your XP, get a vowel.
Again, the con in this case would be that eventually you could have a player essentially solve it by rolling enough times, but it is an encrypted text, so that you can put an inherent limit on what the character is capable of doing. The player can supersede it, but the character might be like, okay, well, hey, you're just figuring it out, so you've got like an A and a D, okay, like those are A's and those are D's, and then let somebody kind of work through it. Maybe they get the N as a result of that when they find the word and all sorts of fun stuff can kind of roll off of that, and just having a couple letters can help you figure out the rest of the stuff, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Now, encrypted text can be, and I think the way you're thinking about it right now is just letter substitution, like just mixing up the letters, and L's are M's and A's are actually R's, and
or symbols are something else,
something like that. Exactly. There are other ways to do it. You can have a lot of complicated cryptic encryptions. If you go and look up different sort of encryptions online, they can get super complicated very quickly. Don't do that. You should keep it fairly simple, fairly in the realm of somebody who is just sitting down at a table with a sheet of paper to be able to solve. You don't want this to have to go through some sort of decrypting algorithm on a computer and spend hours and hours trying to figure out what you're trying to say. People should be able to solve it.
Yes, you're not going to be able to give somebody like a 256-bit encryption thing and say,
terrible idea,
and solve this, because you're not going to be able to do that without a computer. Okay, like it's just not going to happen. You're not going to be a human who's going to go like, "Oh, I figured it out." Like, no, it's not going to work. It's a bad encryption at that point.
I mean, it would be very fun in a cyberpunk game to give somebody an encrypted file that's actually just straight up encrypted file, and then they have to go find the SSH key later. That's fun, but that's not a puzzle. That's a quest.
Yes.
Right? That's not a puzzle. They're not sitting there like, trying to solve it. They just have to go and get the key to open up the thing. So yeah, keep your encryption simple. It doesn't just have to be flipping letters around. You can have progressive puzzles. You can have spatial puzzles. You can have symbols. You could have the same sort of encryption, but use like a word cipher. So like different areas of your, I don't know, mega dungeon may have use the same base encryption, but alter it slightly based off of each area that your players go into, so that they solve this area's encryption and they understand how the encryption works, but the new area's encryption doesn't work the same way.
Yeah, again, you want whatever it is that the pattern can be recognizable should you get enough of the symbology of the encryption eventually, that you can be like, oh, okay, this is how we get here. Are these shifted this many ways, or all that silliness.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the word for this area is fluffernutter. I mean, obviously it's not, because it's got multiples of the same letter, and that's just going to screw everything up. But still, yeah, I think encrypted text is interesting because you can introduce it, and then you can keep using it. And when your players have figured it out, it adds flavor to the dungeon. It adds flavor to what they're seeing. These are hidden messages for those players that have solved it. They are the thieves' cant of not being thieves' cant, because thieves' cant is terrible. I mean, I just don't like thieves' cant. Okay.
I don't agree with this last one, but I'll let you say that.
Okay. So Sudoku is a 9x9 grid with 9 squares, 3x3 each in said grid, where you got to like put your numbers 1 through 9 in each line, box, and column, such that no number is in any of those twice.
Yes,
right?
in your rows and in your boxes. Your boxes have to go line up 1 through 9. Your rows have to line up 1 through 9 horizontally and vertically, and you can't intersect the numbers, and you can't repeat the numbers throughout there. So
that's too big for your players. Don't do that. The concept is great. The concept is real fun. Don't do a 9x9 grid, because your players, I can fly through some of these things, but I've seen other ones where like they're complicated and they take hours to solve.
Depending on the complexity of your Sudoku, it can take a very long time. Once you have enough of it solved, it runs really quick. And if you have enough numbers and they're already pre-generated, it can help you solve them pretty quick. But you're still talking anywhere between like 20 minutes to an hour, depending on how proficient you are at Sudoku.
Yeah. Well, and then there's variant rules also. I play these a lot. These are like if you look up generally approachable Sudoku or GAS, you can look up things like Cracking Decrypted or whatnot. They take Sudoku puzzles and they get rid of a bunch of the numbers and put like lines all over it and colors, and like the colors mean different things. The lines do different stuff, and it's a puzzle on a puzzle. Don't do that. I like Sudoku that is smaller. The concept of row or column no two match. One thing I saw when I was looking up different puzzles, there was a subreddit for D&D puzzles, and one of the top entries there was just that. It was like a 5x5 box, and the players like had to get little tiles, and the tiles were representative of the different types of soldiers in this guy's army. And a couple of the soldiers were already in the box, and they had to go and get the other soldiers and put them in the box so that you never had the same type of soldier in any row or column. And it was a little dwarven stone box, and that's fine. It's it doesn't have to be 9x9. I don't suggest that. It's too big. But little ones where you can it's an easy thing to see.
Okay, I mean, I guess that sometimes works.
I don't think it's one of those puzzles that you can like do over and over in your game.
No, I think it's a one-time puzzle. I probably would bring it up for many, many, many games to come.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gonna do it once and be like, "We did it. We did a Sudoku."
Yeah. Your riddles, you can do those often. You can do a cryptics or two. Encrypted text can absolutely be reused. Sliding tiles, you really got to like do some variations with them, just to make them feel like they belong in the game to begin with. But if you do it right, you can redo them.
Sliding tiles, like switches, like in the same vein, where like they're simple and they can be brute forced, and they kind of feel like, in a lot of ways, they feel like, well, what's the point of some of these things? Because I can see the answer so clearly, or like they seem so simple in that regard. And again, the concept of when you're focusing on like the mega dungeon side of things, or like a real strict dungeon, they fit better there because they're more in line with like what the place looks like or what's kind of going on. So
yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything I've got so far.
Okay, well then that will wrap us up for the week. So if you have your thoughts on puzzles that work, or puzzles that players really like, maybe you've run a couple puzzles that have just wowed your players and have floored them, and your players have not been pissed off that they had to solve them themselves. Let us know. Level Up Your Gaming Podcast at gmail.com or facebook.com/levelupyourgaming. The podcast is also on YouTube. So smash the like button there. Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast site. Review it. Recommend it to a friend. All those good things. And that'll wrap us up for the week. So for Josh, I'm Aaron. Have a good week, everyone.
Bye.